Your Holiness, this morning we have been speaking about the modes of attention, but still there is not quite a clear understanding of what attention really is. And we hope that we can elucidate now what attention is from at least the Pali canon side. And we're very fortunate to have Professor Rupert Gethin here. He's from the University Buddhist Studies of Bristol, and he's also the president of the Pali Text Society. And he has written many articles and a wonderful book as an introduction to Buddhism, which is extremely accessible for Westerners particularly, to understand what is actually the thought of Buddhism. And I'm really excited to listen now to Rupert's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diego. It's a great honor for me to be invited and to talk to Your Holiness. I find myself in a very odd position trying to explain Buddhism to you. That is the
But historically, Pali is something like foundation. The Sanskrit tradition, I think, sun. So we mainly belongs to the
Sanskrit. Yeah.
So when preparing my talk, I took some confidence that I would be talking about Theravada Buddhism and not Indo-Tibetan Buddhism. But then as I prepared my talk, when I started, I thought, yes, I understand these things quite well. And then I started thinking about them more in the context of this dialogue. And I thought, actually, I'm not sure that I understand this. It's quite difficult. One of the problems, it seems to me, in the dialogue between science and Buddhism with regard to the understanding of the mind and attention is that the discussion is usually carried out in English, and we use English words for Buddhist concepts, but sometimes these terms are not very well or precisely defined. So this afternoon, what I want to try to do is to look at the Theravada understanding of what might be broadly called attention, the kinds of things that Anne Treisman was talking about this morning. So I want to look at the Theravada understanding of some of the technical terms and see if we can at least get a clearer idea of how the Theravada tradition defines these terms. I think a lot is in common with Indo-Tibetan Buddhism, but also some differences. And sometimes the differences are instructive. They sharpen the understanding of things. So.
I think actually, in the reality, Indo-Tibetan Buddhist tradition, actually a combination of Sanskrit and Pali. So if we make sort of distinction, Pali tradition and Indo-Tibetan tradition, I think it may create confusion. So that, like Abhidhamma Koshakarika, mainly, the real source is Pali tradition. Except, and also there are Devaso Sosishung de Yorvang.
Also, there are texts that belong to the different sub-schools of Vaibhashika tradition.
The Nalanda tradition, those Nalanda masters, I think they also top scholar of Pali. And on top of that, top scholar of Sanskrit.
Sarvastivada. So His Holiness's point is that although the monastic lineage that the Tibetans inherited is that of Sarvastivada tradition, but within the texts that are studied, there are also texts that belong to the other sub-schools of Vaibhashikas, not just Sarvastivada.
So Pali tradition there. So into Tibetan tradition, yes. Pali tradition included.
Yes.
So that the Yawachet.
Anyway, what the definitions that I will talk about today come only from Theravada Pali texts.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay. So, just to give a quick outline of what I will talk about. So, first of all, I'm going to talk about the mental factors involved in simple awareness, according to Theravada Buddhism, these Chaitasakas. Then I want to talk about mental factors involved in more complex kinds of awareness. Then I'm going to talk a little bit, I hope, about Buddhism and tightrope walking. And maybe then I will talk about 4 courses of awareness as they are understood in Theravada Buddhism. This will become clearer later. And finally, maybe a little bit about Buddhism and map making maps.
Would you explain what you mean by map making?
How to make a map of... when we go out in a city or in a country we don't know, we need a map. And in a way, I think the Buddhist understanding, maybe even the scientific understanding, is a bit like a map of the mind.
Yeah.
Right.
So, first of all, simple awareness. So, the most simple kind of awareness that there is, according to Theravada Buddhism, has this name, citta. So, citta is defined very simply as consciousness of an object. That's all that seems to be said. But as in the Vaibhashika tradition, this consciousness of an object cannot occur in isolation. It always occurs with other mental factors. So the in fact, the most simple kind of awareness in Theravada Buddhism involves citta and at least 7 other factors. They give a list of 7. We mentioned this yesterday. So the factors are quite familiar. In fact, all of them are mentioned in Sarvastivada sources, but not all of them are considered universal to all consciousness. So the factors are consciousness plus contact, passa, sparsha, feeling, vedana, perception, sanjna, willing or volition, cetana, one-pointedness, chittaikagrata, life, jivatindriya, and then attention, we say for the moment, manaskara.
So how does the tradition define jiva indriya?
Jiva. This was one of the ones that I was not going to talk about. A difficult question for me. I think it is simply a mental counterpart to the physical counterpart. So some kind of matter has to have jivatindriya. In the Theravada system, they also say that the mind needs jivatindriya to be alive in some way. That is, so it is what makes consciousness alive.
Yeah, okay.
It sustains it.
In Abhidhammakosha, jiva indriya is defined as life force, and what is a life force? It's the basis of warmth and consciousness.
Okay.
His Holiness said it's very vague and quite circular. So His Holiness is wondering, because if you look at Jaina taxonomy of reality, they have 9 kind of primary facts, and one of which is the life force.
Yes.
He's wondering how are they defining that?
So this should be common. It should be common.
Yes.
One reality.
Yeah.
Not like Atma or not Atma.
Yeah.
I think this is common.
Yes,
so I think
it is.
we can seek some easier sort of
understanding.
Understanding about these things. Where Buddhist explanation failed, I think we should seek from
China.
like that.
So, although there are 8 qualities involved in the most simple kind of awareness, chitta plus the 7, I want to focus on just 4 of them, because it seems to me that these are very relevant to the kind of discussion we had this morning. So I have already said something about chitta. It is just this bare consciousness of an object. It's nothing else. But it needs these other factors in order to fully be conscious. So I'm going to talk about perception now, one-pointedness, and attention, these ones, their definition. So the first one, perception. So this is how it is, sanya. So this is how it is defined in the Theravada texts. It says it has the characteristic of perceiving. Not very helpful. Though actually, this is I think it is important that it uses an action word, perceiving. Yeah. It is an event. It is something that happens. So its function is to make a mark on the object that is a condition for perceiving again that something is the same thing. So you make a mark. So this is like a carpenter making a mark on a piece of wood. This seems very clear. And it manifests by producing the idea, the sanya, that corresponds to the mark that has been observed. So this seems to be perception in a particular kind of technical sense. It's very specific. So it's to do with categorizing and putting labels on things. And it seems to me that it is understood as a kind of mental filing system. You put what you have perceived in the right boxes. The fact that it is to do with making a mark means that it is clearly important for the Theravada understanding of how memory works, since memory is also a matter of recognizing things and recalling things and comparing present experience with past experience. So it's very important for memory, this category of sanya. So
memory.
So here, memory, you're talking about sati?
No. Memory. This is a difference, I think, between Theravada and Vaibhashika, Sarvastivada, that they put much more emphasis on sanya as to do with memory. In the Pali tradition, sati, smriti, is exclusively kusala, wholesome. I will talk about this.
We're checking, because in the Tibetan system we have Abhidhammakosha and Samuchaya system. So here, the Abhidhammakosha perspective may be more relevant. Yeah.
So it's also important to understand that from the Theravada perspective, and I think probably from the Sarvastivada perspective as well, sanjñā doesn't necessarily perceive what is there. It can get things wrong. So this is an example given in the text. When young animals look at a scarecrow, they get the idea, they get the perception, person, yes. We hope, or the farmer hopes. And again, 1 year from now, when I try to recall what happened here, I will maybe have a different sanya from other people. So sanya can be quite different. It doesn't correspond to reality, as it were, necessarily.
Because in the bare sense, from the Sarvastivada point of view, samnya means discrimination and recognizing something as it is. So it could be totally mistaken, but you can still think that's it.
Yes, okay. Yeah. I think that's... So the next factor important in attention I want to talk about is this one-pointedness, because there was some...
So this is omnipresent mental factors.
This one,
Yeah.
Chitta Kaggata. Yes,
yeah.
omnipresent. For Theravada, it is omnipresent.
He's only asking about samnya. Samnya is omnipresent.
Also omnipresent.
So that's same, yeah.
So this morning there was some discussion of one-pointedness. I think the definition is important. So this Chitta Kaggata, I think, as was said this morning, is a term for samadhi when it occurs in any kind of consciousness. So the Theravada is saying that there is a small element of a seed of samadhi in every kind of consciousness.
So generally, if you look at many of the qualities that generally the Buddhist perspective is that if you look at many of the qualities that the meditators are cultivating, whether it is single-pointedness of the mind or vipassana, these are qualities that arise from natural faculties that remain in the form of seed, naturally present in all of us. Yeah.
So
shamatha, attainment of shamatha is function of perfecting and developing this single-pointedness.
I just want to look at the definition because it seems to me quite important. So the definition, its characteristic is not wandering away, not being distracted. Its function is to make the qualities that have arisen congeal, stick together. So this is old-fashioned, it's like water binding together soap powder to make a ball of soap.
So even in the case of, say, a distorted awareness, one would expect some degree of this chitta ekagata.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the Theravada.
For the Theravada.
Yeah. So,
because His Holiness is saying that this is the same perspective from the Abhidhamma Kosha, and for the time being he's saying, leave Abhidhamma Samuccaya aside, because my personal preference is for Abhidhamma Samuccaya.
So, for the Theravada, I think it's important to understand that one-pointedness is not trying to make the mind stay with the object. It is actually the mind resting on the object.
Exact.
Yeah. So
it's not a matter of effort.
Yeah. So concentration is easy. Okay. You know that you have concentration when it is easy to stay with the object. There is no tendency to wander. I think this is important for attention. It's also important to note that for the Theravada, you can be very concentrated, but no mindfulness.
So can you explain that?
So, if I watch the television, I am very concentrated on watching the television, but this is not really mindfulness. Or if I have a nice meal, I sit and eat, and I have no attention for anything else, so I'm very focused and concentrated. I don't have to make my mind pay attention to them.
So His Holiness is wondering, what about people who seem to be very focused and mindful in what they're doing?
Wrongdoing.
And maybe completely destructive in a destructive activity. Would you say there is no mindfulness there?
For the Theravada, they have to say that it is not real mindfulness. There is they say strong attention, but strong concentration, strong sanya, but no real mindfulness.
So on this question one, I'm interpreting. So on the question one, are you virtually equating mindfulness as a mental factor with right mindfulness?
Yes.
Good.
So this is for Theravada. Must be.
His Holiness is wondering whether, in the Abhidhamma Kosha system, if mindfulness smriti is listed as a universal, omnipresent, then that would imply that it's not virtuous. So His Holiness is wondering whether that is really the Vaibhashika position or Vasubandhu's own position where he is presenting Sotrantika.
Okay.
But my suggestion was that he was presenting Vaibhashika faithful, because otherwise he would have something at the end saying that's what they say, or they claim, or they assert. He always kind of indicates that.
So, okay. So now I want to talk about this one, attention, manasikara in Pali, manaskara. So manasikara makes the mind unlike the previous mind. It brings the mind into action by leading the mind to the object. It has the characteristic of making the mind move, the function of joining the associated mental qualities together on the object. It manifests a state of facing the object. Because it leads associated mental qualities to the object, it should be seen as their charioteer or guide. So manasikara seems to be something very simple. It simply steers the mind to an object. It doesn't do anything else other than that. And there also seems to be this idea that without manasikara, we would be stuck. The mind wouldn't be able to shift, to move to the next object. Very simple.
So how is the distinction drawn between then the function of cetana, the intention, and manasikara, the attention? Because cetana also has the function of bringing the mind to the object.
But I think cetana is understood as having some purpose, whereas manasikara has no purpose, no will.
So am I right in understanding that cetana or the intention needs to have some kind of purpose, and towards that purpose the mind is directed, whereas manasikara simply steers all the associated mental factors to the object?
This is what I understand. It's like just looking.
So there is no specific purpose. Yeah?
No specific purpose.
So what about purpose? So what about very natural cognitive activities that just seem to pop up, where there is no deliberate intention? So in these processes, we would find both cetana and manasikara.
That is correct, yes. There is a distinction. This is, I feel, this is like a Geshe exam, I think. I have a horrible feeling I may fail.
You'll be in good company.
The reason why is, to give a little background.
Yeah.
Solons was saying that when he has been exposed with the Abhidhamma Samuchaya's listing of the 5 omnipresent factors, putting feeling as the first one. In the list, so is the first one. So he has never really been comfortable that something isn't quite right here. Then later on, because he feels that in terms of the actual development, it is the intention, the cetana, should come first, which then leads to manasikara. the intention, and then to attention, and then so on. But then later he read another text by Asanga, Shravaka Bhumi, which is the levels of the levels of Shravaka, where Asanga has a much more detailed explanation, where he talks about the intention being the first one, and then intention is the one factor that turns the mind to the object, and manasikara or attention selects from the field of experience what one wants to attend to, and then comes the perception or discrimination, and then which then leads to the contact, and then contact leads to the feeling. So which His Holiness feels is a kind of phenomenologically a kind of a more understandable kind of a sequence. So because he's still quite unsettled, so that's why he's asking you these very probing, specific questions. Yeah.
No, it is.
Yes. No. Yes. So he's saying that, so the here in this context of debate, the opponent, your opponent, is someone who is asking these questions out of pure heart, wanting to learn something.
I think the Theravada makes a distinction between Chaitana that is more active, that is really active, and Chaitana that is somehow almost dormant. Yeah. It is still there. So Chaitana is
Sempa.
Is more like the kind of director. I think one simile, if I remember correctly, for Manasikara is it's like a rudder.
I need to interject.
Yeah.
To include all the scientists, we're asking for them to have a very steep learning curve here.
Yeah.
But if you can keep with the English, because you've made one-on-one translations, that Manasikara and so forth. If you can use the English, I think it will be helpful for everybody.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So Chetana is volition or intention, as you wish.
Volition or intention can be more active and can be almost dormant. So in the dormant state, it is not really. It's taking a back seat. It only. So it.
So, in connection with Chetana, the intention, there's a discussion in the Sarvastivada of karma, which are in the form of Chetana, intention, and then the intended karma. Are these distinctions? Is these distinctions drawn in the Theravada tradition as well? So you want to bring this up?
Sure. Yeah. Within karma, there's a very important distinction in this tradition anyway, the Indo-Tibetan, between voluntary and involuntary behavior, action. If it's involuntary, then it's a very different type of action than where there's a full intention behind it.
Yes.
So killing a fly accidentally, you just step on it, you never saw it, whereas seeing a fly and then hitting it like that, these are two very different actions.
Yes.
So the question His Holiness just now posed is making this very reasonable.
My
mistake.
Sorry.
I thought it was going well.
The distinction is drawn between karma in the form of an intention, which leads to the action, and the intended karmic act. So you have an intention to do something, and then this leads to an actual action, which is the outcome. So the actual action is the intended karmic action, and the intention that gives rise to is the karma in the form of an intention. So, so here the same term is used, chetana, or intention. So, is that the same as the 5 omnipresent factors, or 7?
다지는 융화를 통해서 사벨레스.
no.
다도 수신이 쉬고 다다. 잠을로. 편주로 인자로. 단 도리로 인지도 맨자차. 자, 드림 비자네 딘데한테 심주 서버티 융화를 낸 정해지로. 고 드라면 레면도 와.
Because here, in the context of karma, then it's not a dormant intention, because it is leading to an actual physical and verbal act.
Yeah. What I wanted to say, in the simplest kind of awareness, when we simply, as we were talking yesterday, see color or hear sound, before you react, because Chaitana is, or volition, intention is in some sense present. But in that simplest awareness, it is just dormant. It is not really doing anything very much.